Have you ever felt the coldness creeping into a marriage that once burned bright? Have you watched love turn into silence, warmth into distance, connection into empty ritual? And when that distance takes hold, is there any prayer strong enough to pull two hearts back together? Throughout the 20th century, in the stone corridors of San Giovanni Rotondo, a Capuchin priest with bleeding hands spent 15 to 19 hours every single day, hearing the secrets of broken souls. From 1918 to 1923, Padre Pio sat in that confessional longer than most people stayed awake. By the 1960s, he still heard 8 hours daily. In 1962 alone, 83,035 women and 19,837 men registered for confession. That is 273 people per day kneeling before a man who could see straight through to the marrow of your life. Among those thousands who knelt in that dark wooden box were wives who had stopped speaking to their husbands, husbands who no longer touched their wives, couples who lived in the same house but existed in separate worlds, and Padre Pio saw it coming before they did. One testimony stands carved in the archives of the friary. A young woman finished confessing her sins. Nothing unusual, standard confession. She stood to leave. Then Padre Pio stopped her cold. "You have to immerse yourself in the silence of prayer," he said, "and you will save your marriage." The woman froze. She had not mentioned her marriage. Her marriage had no problems. Everything seemed fine. She walked out confused, maybe even annoyed. Months passed. Then the coldness started. Small things first. Her husband staying late at work. Conversations that used to flow now died in seconds. Dinners eaten in silence. The bed growing wider between them. Distance crept in like winter fog, thick and choking. But she remembered what Padre Pio had said. She immersed herself in prayer. She fought for that marriage in the only place that mattered, and the marriage survived. She testified years later that without that warning, without those months of prayer building a foundation she did not know she needed, the family would have shattered. If you value documented Catholic testimony like this, subscribe. It is the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you are hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from Padre Pio Devotion's archived testimonies and the Catholic Defender's compilation of sworn statements from those who lived with the saint, drawing from the historical documentation preserved at the Friary of Our Lady of Grace in San Giovanni Rotondo. These are not generic hagiographies. These are testimonies taken under oath during the canonization process, witnessed by Capuchin friars who served alongside Padre Pio for decades. Now back to the information. Padre Pio did not need you to tell him your life. He saw it. Father Pasquale Cataneo, a priest from Fiera di Primiero, traveled to San Giovanni in July 1988 to make his confession. On the bus ride there, he spent hours examining his conscience, going through every sin, every fault, preparing himself. But as the bus approached the town and he looked out at the Gargano Mountains, one thought kept circling his mind. The spiritual life at times seems like trying to climb glass. He walked into the friary, waited his turn, entered the confessional, knelt down, confessed his sins. Padre Pio gave him absolution. Father Cataneo stood to leave, relief flooding through him. He had made a good confession. Then he glanced back one last time at the confessional screen. Padre Pio smiled at him with an amused look and said, "So, the spiritual life seems like climbing. Glass, eh?" Father Cataneo could not speak. He had never said those words aloud. Padre Pio had pulled them straight from his thoughts on a bus miles away hours before. From that moment, Father Cataneo was convinced Padre Pio was enlightened by the Holy Spirit to guide souls. This was not lucky guessing. This was seeing. And what Padre Pio saw in marriages terrified him. Dr. Schuba, one of Padre Pio's spiritual sons, came to him one day in the 1950s with a family problem. One of his relatives had decided to divorce her husband. The husband had mistreated her. The marriage had become, in Dr. Schuba's own words, an absolute disaster. The family was drowning in unhappiness. Dr. Schuba believed divorce was the right solution. Padre Pio did not agree. Each case was different, but in this marriage, Padre Pio did not feel divorce was the answer. He told Dr. Schuba plainly that the marriage should not be dissolved. Dr. Schuba went back to his relative and told her Padre Pio was against the divorce. She sat with that for days. Then she wrote Padre Pio a long letter pouring out the heartaches of her marriage, the pain, the loneliness, the mistreatment. She laid it all bare. Padre Pio wrote back. His counsel was direct. He told her the path to healing was not separation, but transformation through prayer and sacrament. The woman decided to trust him. She stayed. She prayed. And he told her husband things in the confessional that no one else knew, sins buried so deep the man had convinced himself they were invisible. He confessed them. The woman could feel her husband's sincerity when he asked for forgiveness. She let go of the painful past. The couple reconciled. Years later, they testified that they felt the happiness of a loving marriage again. But not every story ends that way. Padre Pio saw marriages die slowly. He saw them turn cold, not from violence or betrayal, but from neglect. From couples who stopped praying together, stopped going to Mass together, stopped receiving communion. The spiritual life dried up, and with it, the marriage. In 1950, a 21-year-old woman named Paola lived in San Giovanni Rotondo. She suffered from depression and serious lung problems. She went to Padre Pio regularly, and through his intercession, she was cured. Convinced her vocation was marriage, she asked Padre Pio for advice. "What is your deepest desire?" he asked. She said she wanted to start a family, that she loved children and dreamed of having them. "So let us pray that the good God will allow you to meet a good young man," Padre Pio said. Then he gave her specific instructions. Go to confession regularly. Receive communion every day. Some time later, Paola noticed a man named Giovanni who seemed interested in her. They crossed paths often in Padre Pio's circle. Giovanni had first met Padre Pio in 1928 when he was 8 years old, receiving his first communion from the Saint's bleeding hands. Years later, Giovanni worked at Casa Sollievo della Sofferenza, the hospital Padre Pio founded. Paola and Giovanni got engaged. They committed to praying together every single day, entrusting their future marriage to God. On August 27, 1950, during a 5 a.m. Mass, Padre Pio blessed their union. He said 3 times, "Be happy, be happy, be happy." Months into the marriage, they learned Paola could not have children. She was infertile. Doctors confirmed it. No hope. Padre Pio told Giovanni he would pray the chaplet of the Sacred Heart of Jesus every single day for them. This was Padre Pio's favorite prayer of petition. He told Giovanni, "You will see. You will have as many children as the choirs of angels." That meant 9. On July 24th, 1951, a baby girl was born, but she immediately fell critically ill. Doctors said she had no chance of survival. The couple, devastated, asked Padre Pio to pray for their dying daughter. The friar immediately reassured them the child would not die and would live a long time. She survived. Over the years, Paola and Giovanni had 9 children, exactly as Padre Pio said. They went to him for confession. They prayed with him. They asked his advice about their marriage, about raising their children, about daily problems. After Padre Pio died in 1968, Paola said something that cuts through every marriage manual ever written. After 60 years of marriage, I can say that Padre Pio's recipe, the chaplet of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, works. Giovanni and I love each other as much as on the first day. 60 years, same love. First day intensity. Because they prayed together, daily, without exception. Padre Pio saw what happens when couples stop. He saw the coldness that creeps in when prayer dies, when Mass attendance becomes irregular, when confession is skipped, when the sacraments turn into obligations instead of lifelines. He saw marriages that looked fine on the outside, rotting from the inside, and he warned them. A woman from the Philippines worked as a sports events specialist. Her job required constant travel abroad. In 2008, she was on assignment in Jakarta, Indonesia, when her husband emailed her. He wanted a separation. The pain, she said, cannot be described. She went to the Catholic cathedral in Jakarta and spoke to a priest. He told her to remain with her husband. She went back for Sunday Mass and spoke to another priest. Same message. She prayed for guidance and opened her Bible. The words of Jesus on divorce stared back at her. She called her husband. He would not answer. She sent text messages. Silence. She prayed to Padre Pio for the healing of her marriage. One night she had a dream. She came back from work abroad, and there was an old man in her house. The hood of his black coat was pulled up over his head. In the dream, her husband was there too. He was smiling at her. He embraced her with love. All was well. After that dream, she felt stronger emotionally. She felt she was not alone. When she finished her assignment and returned to the Philippines, she was terrified. She did not know what to expect. It turned out to be one of the most beautiful homecomings she ever had. The love her husband expressed was something she had not felt from him for a long time. She believed it was Padre Pio in her dream, telling her he was praying for her. Padre Pio told his spiritual children that the soul is like a house that needs to be cleaned once a week. That is why he recommended weekly confession. Not demanded, recommended, because he knew what dirt accumulates in a soul in a marriage when cleaning stops. Small resentments, unspoken frustrations, buried anger, coldness that builds layer by layer until 2 people who once loved each other can barely stand to be in the same room. One of Padre Pio's spiritual daughters met him when she was 18 years old. She was suffering from poor health. Padre Pio put his hand on her head and said, "Do not worry about anything." His hand felt like a very heavy weight pressing on her head. She was healed at his touch. Later, when she married and had a family, trials came. She found out her husband was unfaithful to her. To add to her heartache, one of her children became addicted to drugs. During this difficult time, she had a vivid dream of Padre Pio. In her dream, she was in a country setting, and in the distance, she saw Padre Pio. He was running toward her. She woke up convinced the dream meant Padre Pio knew all about her problems and was interceding for her. She recalled that the first time she made her confession to him, he told her not to worry about anything. That memory sustained her through the darkest years of her marriage. Padre Pio heard 5 million confessions in his lifetime. 5 million. He heard them from 1918 until 1968, 50 years in that wooden box. He demanded that each confession be a true conversion. No excuses, no insincerity, frankness, honesty, firm resolution. It was like being before the judgment of God. Among those 5 million confessions were thousands from married couples who had let their spiritual lives die, and with it, their marriages. He told them the same thing over and over. Pray together. Go to confession together. Receive communion together. If you stop doing these things, the coldness will come. You will not see it at first. It will feel like life just got busy. Work, kids, bills, exhaustion. But underneath, the foundation will be cracking. And by the time you notice, the distance between you will be so wide, you will not remember how to reach across it. There is a recorded case of a woman who went to confession to Padre Pio in the 1950s. She knelt in the confessional, opened her mouth to speak, and froze. She could not say a word. Terror gripped her. Padre Pio said gently, "Do you want me to talk for you?" Then he spoke her confession, word by word, every sin she had prepared to say. When he finished, he added, "I will be your spiritual father." She had not told him a single thing. He knew it all. He used that gift to save marriages. He would call a man into the confessional and tell him sins he thought no one knew, affairs hidden for years, financial lies, cruelty toward his wife that he justified as discipline, pornography, coldness disguised as stoicism. And the man would break. Confession would pour out. Padre Pio would give him absolution and tell him exactly what he needed to do to save his marriage. Go home. Confess to your wife. Beg her forgiveness. Start praying the rosary together every night. Go to Mass together every Sunday. Do not miss. Your marriage depends on it. If you value this kind of documented testimony, hit subscribe. Also comment where you are watching from. This research pulls from multiple sources, including sworn testimonies preserved in the archives of San Giovanni Rotondo, particularly from Father Marcelino Iacenzaniro's collection in the Padre Saint Pio of Pietrelcina testimonies, compiled from direct interviews with those who knew the saint, and from Graziella D'Annunzio Mandato's first-hand memoir, Padre Pio, Encounters with a Spiritual Daughter from Pietrelcina, published by Tan Books in 2021. These are not second-hand stories. These are people who knelt in that confessional, who felt the weight of his hand, who heard his voice. Now back to the information. Padre Pio once told a priest, "Before reproaching a soul, I suffer it first. But it is not I who act, but he who is in me and above me." He felt the pain of every failing marriage that came before him. He carried it, and he fought for those marriages with everything he had. In 1962, 273 people per day knelt before him. 3-minute confessions. Do the math. That is 13 and a half hours of hearing sin, pain, betrayal, coldness, death, day after day, year after year. His hands bled constantly, 1 cup of blood from his hands, feet, and sides during Mass. 4 hours to celebrate Mass because he would go into complete ecstasy. He lived in pain every second of every day, and he used that pain as currency to buy back dying marriages. He told people, God runs after the most stubborn souls. They cost him too much to abandon them. After a long day of confessions, he would say, "Oh, the souls, if you knew how much they cost." He saw marriages dying not from catastrophic betrayal, but from slow spiritual starvation. From couples who used to pray together and stopped, who used to go to Mass together and started making excuses, who used to receive communion together and let months slip by. He saw the exact moment the coldness began, and he tried to warn them. A mother of 5 children traveled from Bologna to San Giovanni Rotondo to see Padre Pio. She asked him to accept her as one of his spiritual children. He agreed. When she returned to Bologna, she invoked Padre Pio's presence every day and prayed, "Padre Pio, please watch over my 5 children, protect them, and bless them." More than 5 years passed before she could return to San Giovanni Rotondo. When she finally saw Padre Pio again, she made her confession to him. He remembered her. He knew everything that had happened in those 5 years. He guided her through struggles she had not even mentioned. Padre Pio built his entire ministry on the belief that marriages could be saved through prayer, not through therapy, not through communication workshops, not through date nights or love languages, through prayer. The chaplet of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, daily Mass, weekly confession, the rosary together every night. These were not suggestions. These were the foundation. Without them, the marriage would eventually turn cold. With them, love could last 60 years and feel like the first day. Giovanni Siena, the man who married Paola and had 9 children, wrote a book about Padre Pio called Il mio amico Padre Pio, which translates to My Friend Padre Pio. In it, he documented everything Padre Pio told him about marriage. The advice boiled down to one principle: keep God at the center or lose everything. Padre Pio said to Giovanni, "You and Paola must pray together every day, not separately, together. You must go to confession together. You must receive communion together. If one of you stops, the other must not stop. But the goal is to walk this path side by side. When trials come, and they will come, you must run to prayer first, not away from each other. Giovanni and Paola followed that advice for 60 years, through infertility, through the near death of their first child, through raising 9 children, through financial struggles, through the normal wear and tear of decades together. And at the end, Paola could say with complete honesty that she loved Giovanni as much as on the first day. That is not luck. That is not personality compatibility. That is the result of 60 years of daily prayer together, 60 years of kneeling side by side, 60 years of receiving the Eucharist together, 60 years of confessing sins and starting fresh together, 60 years of choosing God first and each other second. Padre Pio saw marriages that did not do this. He saw them turn cold. He saw husbands and wives become strangers. He saw love die not with a bang, but with a slow, quiet fade. And he grieved over every single one. There is a testimony from a woman who went to confession to Padre Pio in the early 1960s. She confessed her sins. Standard confession. But when she stood to leave, Padre Pio said, "Your marriage is in danger. You do not see it yet, but it is coming. You must begin praying the rosary with your husband every night. Do not skip, ever. This will save you." The woman went home confused. Her marriage was fine. No problems, no coldness. Everything seemed normal. But she trusted Padre Pio. She asked her husband to pray the rosary with her every night. He agreed. Months passed, then years. And slowly, without either of them noticing at first, a coldness tried to creep in. Work stress, financial pressure, kids pulling them in different directions, the usual things that erode a marriage. But every night they prayed the rosary together, and every night that coldness was pushed back. By the time they realized what Padre Pio had seen, the danger had passed. The rosary had built a wall the coldness could not breach. Padre Pio told his spiritual children, "The rosary is the weapon. When everything else fails, pray the rosary. When you do not know what to do, pray the rosary. When your marriage feels cold and distant and you cannot remember why you fell in love, pray the rosary together. Do not pray it alone. Pray it together, out loud, every night, no exceptions." This was not romantic advice. This was survival instruction. In 1967, Padre Pio confessed about 15,000 women and 10,000 men, an average of 70 people per day. By then, he was 80 years old and in constant pain, but he kept hearing confessions. He kept sitting in that box. He kept listening to the same sins over and over: adultery, pornography, coldness, distance, neglect, spiritual laziness, and he kept giving the same remedy: prayer, confession, communion, together. People would ask him, "Padre Pio, how do we keep love alive?" He would say, "You do not keep love alive. God keeps love alive. Your job is to stay connected to God. If you stay connected to God, you will stay connected to each other. If you drift from God, you will drift from each other. It is not complicated. It is hard, but it is not complicated." Padre Pio demanded holiness in marriage. He refused to give absolution to couples who practiced contraception. He told them plainly, "You are rejecting God's plan for marriage. You cannot receive communion while rejecting God. Matrimony is for children. Children are a gift of the Lord. If you refuse that gift, you cut yourself off from grace, and without grace, your marriage will die." This was not popular then. It is even less popular now. But Padre Pio did not care about popularity. He cared about souls. He saw what happened to marriages built on convenience instead of sacrifice. They turned cold. They became empty. The love died because it was never rooted in anything deeper than feelings. He told couples, "Feelings come and go. Love is a decision. You decide to love every day. You decide to pray every day. You decide to forgive every day. You decide to stay every day. And those daily decisions, stacked year after year, become a marriage that lasts." Giovanni and Paola Siena made those daily decisions for 60 years. They went to Padre Pio for confession regularly until his death in 1968. They asked his advice about raising their 9 children. They asked his advice about daily problems. They never stopped. Even after Padre Pio died, they continued the practices he taught them: daily prayer together, weekly confession, daily mass when possible, the chaplet of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, the rosary every night. And at the end, when they looked back on 60 years, they could say they loved each other as much as on the first day. Not because they were special, not because they had perfect compatibility, but because they built their marriage on prayer. And prayer does not fail. Padre Pio saw marriages fail when prayer stopped. He saw the exact trajectory. First, daily Mass becomes weekly Mass. Then weekly Mass becomes monthly Mass. Then monthly Mass becomes Christmas and Easter Mass. Confession stops altogether. The rosary gets forgotten. Prayer becomes something you do when you are in trouble instead of something you do every day. And slowly, without anyone noticing, the coldness sets in. Husband and wife stop talking about God. They stop talking about their souls. They stop talking about eternity. They talk about bills and schedules and what is for dinner. The conversation becomes shallow. The intimacy fades. They live in the same house, but exist in different worlds. And one day they wake up and realize they do not know each other anymore. Padre Pio saw this pattern thousands of times, and every time he said the same thing. Go back to prayer, go back to confession, go back to Mass, go back to communion, reconnect with God, and you will reconnect with each other. It is not too late. It is never too late as long as you are both still breathing. But some people did not listen. They let the coldness win. They divorced. They remarried. They committed adultery. And Padre Pio wept for them. He said, divorce is the passport to hell, not because God does not love divorced people, but because divorce is the result of rejecting God's plan. And when you reject God's plan, you step outside his protection. You enter dangerous territory, and souls are lost. Padre Pio fought for every marriage. He fought with prayer. He fought with the chaplet of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, which he prayed every single day for all who asked his intercession. He fought with his stigmata, offering his pain as payment for dying marriages. He fought with hours in the confessional, listening to the same sins, giving the same advice, refusing to give up on anyone. When he died on September 23, 1968, he had spent 50 years with the stigmata, 50 years bleeding, 50 years in pain, 50 years offering himself as a victim for souls. And among those souls were thousands of marriages he saved through prayer. The testimonies are clear. The documentation is solid. People who were there, who knelt in that confessional, who heard his voice, who felt his hand, they all say the same thing. Padre Pio could see into marriages. He could see the coldness coming before it arrived. He could see the cracks in the foundation before they widened. And he warned people. He gave them the tools to fight: prayer, confession, communion, together, daily, without exception. This was not mysticism for mysticism's sake. This was practical spiritual warfare. Padre Pio understood that marriage is under constant attack from the world, from the flesh, from the devil, and the only defense is prayer, not occasional prayer, not crisis prayer, daily prayer, together as a couple, kneeling side by side before God and asking him to keep the coldness away. Giovanni and Paola did this for 60 years. They are not the only ones. There are hundreds of documented cases of couples who followed Padre Pio's advice and saw their marriages transformed. Marriages that were dead came back to life. Marriages that were cold became warm again. Marriages that were falling apart held together. And it all came down to one thing: prayer. Padre Pio once said, "If the answer does not come from above, what can I say?" He understood that he had no power on his own. All his gifts, all his insights, all his ability to see into souls, it all came from God. He was just the instrument, and the instrument's job was to point people back to God. So when couples came to him with cold marriages, he did not give them psychology. He did not give them relationship tips. He gave them God. He said, pray together, go to Mass together, receive communion together, confess your sins together. Do this and you will make it. Stop doing this and you will not. It was that simple. It was that hard. In the archives of San Giovanni Rotondo, there is a photograph of Padre Pio taken in 1965. He is sitting in the confessional. His face is drawn. His eyes are tired. His hands are wrapped in bandages to contain the bleeding. He looks exhausted, and yet there's a line of people stretching out of the frame, waiting to confess to him, waiting for him to see into their souls, waiting for him to tell them the truth they need to hear. Among those people were husbands and wives whose marriages were turning cold, who had stopped praying together, who had let the spiritual life die, who were on the brink of divorce, and Padre Pio, bleeding and exhausted, sat in that box and fought for them, one confession at a time, 3 minutes at a time, 70 people a day, year after year, until he died. He said once, "My real mission will begin after my death." He was right. Millions of people now pray to Padre Pio for the healing of their marriages. They pray the chaplet of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. They go to Mass together. They receive communion together. They confess together. And their marriages are saved, not because Padre Pio is magic, but because he pointed them to the only source of power strong enough to keep a marriage alive: God. On August 27, 1950, when Padre Pio blessed Giovanni and Paola's marriage at 5 a.m. Mass, he said 3 times, "Be happy, be happy, be happy." 60 years later, they were. They loved each other as much as on the first day. That is not a fairy tale. That is what happens when you build a marriage on prayer instead of feelings, on sacrifice instead of convenience, on God instead of yourself. Padre Pio saw what most people miss, that the coldness in a marriage does not start in the bedroom or the bank account or the communication. It starts in the soul. When the soul stops being fed, everything else starts dying. The love dies, the intimacy dies, the connection dies. And 2 people who once could not get enough of each other can barely stand to be in the same room. But if you feed the soul, everything else can survive. You can survive infidelity. You can survive infertility. You can survive financial ruin. You can survive the death of a child. You can survive anything if your soul is being fed. And the way you feed your soul is through prayer, through confession, through Mass, through communion, together. Padre Pio spent 50 years teaching this, 5 million confessions, 19 hours a day in the early years, 8 hours a day in the later years, 70 people a day in his final year, all of them broken in some way, all of them needing to hear the same message. God can save you. Prayer can save you. The sacraments can save you. But you have to use them. You have to pray. You have to confess. You have to receive communion. You have to do it together. You have to do it every day. And if you do, your marriage will not turn cold. It might struggle. It might face trials. It might get hard. But it will not turn cold because God will be there. And where God is, love is, not the shallow love of feelings, but the deep love of sacrifice. The love that lasts 60 years and feels like the first day. In 1967, 1 year before Padre Pio died, he heard the confession of Father John Iacono from Sydney, Australia. Father John had just entered the seminary. He walked into the confessional. He had not said a single word. Padre Pio looked at him and said, "You are here abusively. You did not follow the system." Then he said, "You're entering the seminary because you're going to study for the priesthood, and you're going to find it very difficult in your studies." Father John was stunned. How did Padre Pio know? He had not told anyone about his struggles with studies. He had not even told himself fully, but Padre Pio saw it. And seeing it, he prepared Father John for what was coming. That is what Padre Pio did. He saw what was coming and he prepared people. For marriages, that meant seeing the coldness before it arrived, and giving couples the tools to fight it off. Prayer, confession, communion, together, daily. Those were the tools, and they worked. Giovanni and Paola proved it for 60 years. Thousands of other couples proved it in the decades since. The tools work, but you have to use them. Padre Pio would say, "The sight of so many souls who wish to justify their evil ways pains me, exhausts my brain, and tears at my heart." He saw people making excuses for letting their spiritual lives die. Too busy, too tired, too stressed, too broke, too distracted. And he saw what those excuses led to. Cold marriages, dead marriages, divorced marriages, destroyed families, damned souls. He told people, "Among you I am your brother. On the altar I am your victim. In the confessional I am your judge." In the confessional, he judged with the judgment of God. And the judgment was clear. If you stop praying together, your marriage will die. If you keep praying together, your marriage will live. It is your choice. Most people did not want to hear that. They wanted easier advice. They wanted techniques. They wanted shortcuts. But Padre Pio did not deal in shortcuts. He dealt in truth. And the truth is that marriage without God turns cold. Always. No exceptions. The testimony of the woman who was warned to immerse herself in the silence of prayer before her marriage had any problems proves this. Padre Pio saw the coldness coming months before it arrived. He warned her. She listened. She prayed. And when the coldness came, she was ready. The prayer she had been building up for months held her marriage together. Without that preparation, she testified, the family would have been destroyed. This is what Padre Pio did. He gave people advance warning. He gave them time to build up their prayer life before the crisis hit. Because he understood that you cannot build a foundation during an earthquake. You have to build it before. And if you build it strong enough, the earthquake will not destroy you. Giovanni and Paola built their foundation before they even got married. They prayed together every day during their engagement. They entrusted their future marriage to God. And when they married, they kept building. Daily prayer, weekly confession, daily Mass when possible, the chaplet of the Sacred Heart, the Rosary. For 60 years, no breaks, no vacations from prayer. No exceptions. And at the end, they could testify that Padre Pio's recipe worked. Love as strong on the last day as on the first day. Not because they were lucky, not because they were perfect, but because they prayed. After Padre Pio died, the pilgrims kept coming. The confessional where he sat for 50 years is preserved in the old church of San Giovanni Rotondo. You can still see it, the wooden frame, the screen where thousands of people knelt and confessed their coldness, their distance, their failing marriages. And Padre Pio, bleeding and exhausted, would sit behind that screen and fight for them. He would tell them what they needed to hear, sometimes gently, sometimes harshly, but always truthfully. Your marriage is dying because you stopped praying. Your marriage is cold because you stopped going to Mass. Your marriage is distant because you stopped receiving communion together. Fix this or lose everything. And for those who listened, the marriages were saved. For those who did not, Padre Pio wept. He offered his pain for them. He prayed the chaplet of the Sacred Heart for them. He begged God to give them one more chance. And sometimes God did, and sometimes he did not. But Padre Pio never stopped trying. When Pope John Paul II canonized Padre Pio on June 16, 2002, 300,000 people attended the ceremony. Among them were countless couples whose marriages had been saved by Padre Pio's intercession. Some had met him in life. Most knew him only through prayer. But all of them testified to the same thing. When they started praying together, when they started going to Mass together, when they started receiving communion together, their cold marriages became warm again. This is not magic. This is grace. And grace is available to anyone willing to receive it. You do not have to be special. You do not have to be holy. You just have to be willing. Willing to pray, willing to confess, or willing to receive communion, willing to do it together, willing to do it every day. Padre Pio spent 50 years with bleeding hands, proving that this works. 5 million confessions, 50 years of pain, 50 years of seeing into souls, 50 years of watching marriages die from spiritual starvation, 50 years of giving people the same remedy, prayer. And the testimony is overwhelming. It works. When couples pray together, their marriages survive. When they stop praying together, coldness creeps in. It is not complicated. It is just true. Giovanni Siena died 6 decades after Padre Pio blessed his marriage. Paola died shortly after. They had 9 children, as Padre Pio promised. They loved each other as much on the last day as on the first day, as Padre Pio said they would. And the only reason was prayer, daily prayer, together for 60 years. That is the testimony that Padre Pio left behind. Not mystical experiences, not miracles, just the simple, hard truth that marriage without prayer turns cold. And marriage with prayer can last a lifetime and still feel like the first day. In the wooden confessional of San Giovanni Rotondo, behind a screen soaked with the blood of a stigmatist, Padre Pio heard 5 million confessions and gave 5 million people the same message. Connect to God or lose everything. Pray together or drift apart. Choose the sacraments or watch your marriage die. Some listened. Their marriages survived, some did not. Padre Pio wept for them and kept praying, because that is all he could do. Pray, bleed, suffer, hope, and point people back to God. On his deathbed in 1968, Padre Pio was asked what his final message would be. He said, "Stay close to the sacraments." That was it. 50 years of ministry, 5 million confessions, countless miracles, and his final advice was, stay close to the sacraments, because he knew that is where the power is, not in feelings, not in techniques, not in self-help, but in the sacraments, in prayer, in confession, in communion. For marriages, that meant praying together, going to Mass together, receiving communion together, confessing together, building a life around God instead of building a life around feelings. And the marriages that did this survived. The marriages that did not turn cold, distant, and eventually died. Padre Pio saw it all, from the wooden box where he bled for 50 years. And now, decades after his death, his message is still the same. If you want your marriage to survive, pray together. If you want your love to last, stay close to the sacraments. If you want to avoid the coldness, connect to God every single day, together. Giovanni and Paola proved it works. 60 years, 9 children. Love is strong on the last day as the first, all because they prayed.